Okay, we're going to have a look at the 2021 paper today and the 2020 paper. We'll start with 2021. Um, we've obviously got like the 1B question, how successful was Britain in the wars with France from 1740 to 1763? It's kind of to do with the hegemony question, though it's mostly to do with the war. I mean, the slight difference will be war. So how successful were they? And the
Yeah,
obvious way to break that one down as an essay question would be not very successful in the War of Austrian Succession and why, and then
yeah,
successful in the Seven Years' War. I think you know,
yeah. We should do that one. That's a good point.
yeah,
Hegemony is different to wars. It shows you really have to pay attention to the wording of the question.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Some of the questions seem like they're exactly the same, but just a little change in just one word can
yeah,
actually change it significantly, I think. So
yeah,
let's do it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's start with the civil disobedience Shays Rebellion. You're going to go. I mean, I'll clarify this one. I think this one's a crappy question, to be absolutely honest. And it's like if you got this, you'd be like, well, what's the difference? Because obviously, civil disobedience is all of the resistance they were doing in that time period from 1783 to 1786. And then Shays Rebellion is kind of basically the
Yeah,
culmination of that. So the dates are key because it's the final point. Is
that's
it
right.
building up or is it the greatest challenge? But I think that it's a nasty little question, this, because Shays Rebellion is built. There's a lot of overlap between the 2 points. So really pulling out which one is more important, I think, is quite difficult. Do you want to go why Shays Rebellion is more important, and I'll try and make a
Yeah,
case?
sure.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So it's really, I mean, the rebellion is part of civil disobedience. It's just, is the civil disobedience worse in 1786 to 1787 or 1783 to 1786?
Yeah,
But it seems still a bit weird, doesn't it? I think that
yeah,
the way I would answer this is to say definitely Shays Rebellion. Um,
yeah. Do you want to give me
and
the three
yeah,
factors and why? Yeah.
yeah. So why the first is that it's more significant than the other uprisings.
Hmm.
So there are similar uprisings to Shays Rebellion. This is in a way, intimidation of the courts or even just usurpation of the legislature, right? This is a threat. And this happened, Rhode Island and New Hampshire, that happened between 1783 and 86. I forget the exact dates.
Yeah.
But that happened earlier. It wasn't as significant as Shays Rebellion, though, just in terms of sheer size, and the possibility of it going out of control. Yeah. So, Shays Rebellion, he's got, this is in 1786, he's got about 700 supporters, many of them former soldiers who haven't been paid the War of the Revolution, right? Um, they march on Springfield. They also, I think before that, they intimidate the court because some of his friends were going to get were in trouble because of debts, right? So they basically bust these. They basically prevent the court from judging these individuals who hadn't paid back their debts, and then it turns into a general insurrection. Ooh, insurrection.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and uh, so it was bigger. So that's one reason. It also almost succeeded.
Yeah.
So this is one of the hilarious things about history, which I love so much, is just the randomness of big events. It's just different factors affect whether it works or not. In this case, it was the bad weather. So
Yeah.
um, typical Mass. I mean, maybe it's not so chancy in Massachusetts, which has terrible weather quite a lot. I know because I lived there for a decent period of time. So. Uh, So I think the bad weather made it difficult for them, and probably may have been bigger if it was a nice sunny day to go and defy the Massachusetts legislature, which I think would be fun.
Hmm.
And the biggest reason, so that's those. I'm sort of leading up to the big one. Maybe James, you would recommend putting the most important point first.
Yeah, either
I'm
way, you
going
can
up
build
to a
as long as you
climax
build through, as
here.
long as you build up three
So
reasons, as long as they have 3 points why it's significant. You kind of always have
yeah,
to like at least two, ideally three, tying it to the main point.
yeah. So. So as I said, it's more significant than the other uprisings. It almost succeeded, and the most important point is that it actually was quite important for motivating other states to send delegates to a special convention to reform the Articles of Confederation, right, which then really became the Constitutional Convention
Yeah,
in
which
Philadelphia.
replaced the,
So
yeah.
so Shays' Rebellion basically was a wake-up call, I think, to the other states who may have been more reluctant to send delegates, to impress upon them the weakness, I think, of the Articles of Confederation. The fact that that some rebellious ex-soldiers, and not that many of them, only about 700, they could still cause such an uproar, and they could get close to um, usurping the authority of the state. I think that frightened. I think a lot of people saw this, and that was a pretty important motivating factor. So those are my three reasons.
Yeah,
Um,
I would even add to that, like just on that side, that obviously one of the key re threats to the early republic was they couldn't raise taxes, which meant they couldn't pay the soldiers, which caused the problems in the first place, and the fact that the merchants had to pay to put it down, again highlighted the fact that there was no real army. So I think that rich people realized their rich and urban people realized their like property was in danger, and I think that really, really hastened the demise of
yeah,
the early republic and the
yes,
creation of the federal government.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I think on the other side for civil disobedience, I mean, I think it's really hard to argue this side. I think the only thing you could do is like the civil disobedience was building, I guess is the key point. And if it had been dealt with earlier, then Shays
That's right.
wouldn't have happened. I think it's the only way you could really go at this one. I think,
It's a catalyst strategy.
yeah, seems to be always the same point.
The catalyst
Is
strategy.
it the
Yeah,
catalyst or is it the other one? Yeah, it's like,
I
well,
think the best thing you could say for it would be to talk about the debt,
yeah.
which really is a massive, probably the big issue,
Yeah, and the
right?
printing of money. I think so. Like the printing of
Yeah,
money, obviously, and from the debtors, which was upsetting the creditors, was a problem. So that civil disobedience, they were disobeying the calls not to print money.
yeah, and
Um,
that actually, the Rhode Island and New Hampshire rebellions.
yeah,
Um, un, so the Shays Rebellion was basically a response to. It was also about the debt, but it was about Shay's friends being prosecuted in the
yeah,
court, I believe. Whereas in New Hampshire and Rhode Island, it was basically a mob threatening the legislature,
yeah,
for trying to force them to issue paper money.
yeah,
Right. So that's slightly different. And in a way, the Rhode Island and New Hampshire rebellions
yeah.
um, kind of reflect the issue a bit in a slightly clearer way, I think,
Yeah, and I
than
think that
Shays
the
Rebellion.
the the problem was like all the problems of Shays Rebellion were there already. The farmers weren't being paid; they were having their land confiscated. So that civil disobedience and them refusing to pay it, like trying to stop people from being arrested, was there. It was just like it didn't really have a figurehead, and it didn't really have like like you said, it didn't really come close to succeeding. So it was not a threat. If the key word is threat to the early republic, I don't think the other ones
It
were
says
a threat.
challenge.
Oh, is it challenge? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. I don't think the other ones were a direct challenge to them. I think it was more like it just again it showed that the Articles of Federation wasn't really working, but it's Shay's rebellion that kind of pushed them to the point of being like, we need a more functional government because we need to basically be able to tax and to raise an army to deal with this.
Yeah. I mean, can I be the devil's advocate for a second?
Yeah, go on.
Let me try arguing the other side.
Yeah, go on. Supposed to be
You
my
could
job, but
say
I'm not doing a good job of that. Yeah, go on.
someone's got to step in the breach.
Yeah, yeah,
So you could say, well, Shay's Rebellion, as nasty as it is, and even if let's say it had succeeded, so what? I mean, I don't think that rebellion would have lasted that long. It's in Massachusetts. We're talking about the early republic as a whole.
yeah,
And so maybe if we're talking about Massachusetts specifically, then sure.
Mm.
But we're talking about the early republic, and what we're interested Shays' rebellion is really just a manifestation of deeper issues,
Yeah,
and those deeper issues are absolutely present in 1783 to 1786.
yeah,
And I would mention three things. I'd say first of all the debt.
yeah,
That's not something that just affects Mass New England,
yeah,
even though that's where the rebellions are. It affects the whole republic.
yeah,
I'd say there are also other social divisions between, for example, loyalists and patriots,
yeah.
um, between the American Indians and the colonists, and between wealthy elites and middle class sort of
Yeah, but
traders,
would you put
farmers,
them under
craftsmen.
civil dis? I'm not sure they would come under civil disobedience. Though. I think civil dis.
Yeah, well,
I would say civil
well, I mean,
disobedience is
I look, for
just like
example, no, but in South Carolina, there was almost a civil war between the loyalists and the the say American rebel the those who
yeah,
the Americans, let's say the those who supported
yeah.
the new American colonies. So I think that's significant. And there's also conflict between the colonists and the Native Americans. Again, would that be a threat to the Republic? No, but it's a factor. It's a factor.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I
Um,
just wonder with Native Americans because they're not citizens. So would it be civil disobedience? Doesn't civil disobedience have to come from citizens?
yeah, I agree. I agree. I
Yeah.
agree.
So I think that would be, I
Yeah.
mean, it's again, but that's again,
I think the debt is um the debt I think is the most important here.
yeah.
Um, okay. Anyway, I'd still probably argue Shays Rebellion, but I think you can make a case for civil disobedience if you frame the question in
Yeah,
the
you'd
right
have to
way.
say that it basically led up to Shays Rebellion, and Shays Rebellion was squashed, whereas the civil disobedience was continuing. Like afterwards, I
Yeah.
suppose there was always the danger that there might be another one. But because of the dates, I think if it had civil disobedience in general, because it's put civil disobedience up to the date before Shays Rebellion,
Yeah.
you can't really
Yeah.
include after or where it's running from. So again, the date kind of caps it. And kind of again leads you with that position of are you going it's the catalyst or are you going it's the final point? And there's not really much in between, I think.
I think the date is a bit of a giveaway actually, because
Mm.
1787 is the Philadelphia Convention.
Yeah,
And most history textbooks that I'm aware of, the way that you understand Shays Rebellion is one of the big reasons why the Philadelphia Convention happened.
yeah,
So, you know, if we're not
yeah.
looking beyond 1787, then yeah, I would go for Shays Rebellion.
I think Shays Rebellion is the moment where the rich people go, enough.
Yeah,
We need a functioning federal government.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and cool. Then B, how successful was Britain in its wars with France in the period of 1740 and 1763? I think you just dip this into two. The earlier period, War of Russian Succession, and then the like pre-Pitt, post-Pitt, really.
Yeah.
If you're gonna break it down, I think you can make this into a four-paragraph essay. I think it's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah,
Now that we know OCR's not got a problem with four-paragraph essays.
yeah.
And
But it's interesting. We were just talking about this, that in this question, the key word is wars,
yeah,
not hegemony.
yeah,
There's a difference, right?
yeah, yeah,
So because of the term wars, that means that we're more interested in really the conduct of the war, the
yeah,
actual factors in the war
yeah,
that led to success, and not so much the consequence of British hegemony on the continent and all of those
yeah,
points. So
yeah. No, it's just only the
um,
military element of it. I think that we're dealing
the
with.
military element, yeah, and so if I was going to answer that, I think I completely agree. I'd divide that into two, given that there's two wars, right? So
Yeah,
there's the War of Austrian Succession. And I think that the really key military factor for the War of Austrian Succession is basically poor British leadership and
yeah,
bad coordination between the military and the colonists.
yeah,
Um, although that said, I think the biggest victory is Louisburg,
yeah. They take Louisburg. Yeah,
1745. Louisburg is holds passage to Quebec, so that's the way to Quebec is guarded. I think is by Louisburg. You have to hold that city
yeah,
in order to get to Quebec. But the British give it back to the French in the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle,
Yeah.
1748.
Yeah.
And the other factor you could mention in the War of Austrian Succession is the failure to keep the Ohio Valley.
Yeah.
So the French fortified that, and they managed to hold on to it despite attacks by, well, the colonists and the British Army. But as we said, the bad coordination didn't work,
Yeah.
didn't go very well.
I would just add a
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah,
I I
yeah,
think yes, but I would break it by 70-56, like 70-57, like pre-pip, post-pip, because I think it makes it
yeah,
easier as
yeah.
well. Because then you can, in the fact that they obviously failed in the War of Succession, it was not their target point, on North America at that point to beat the French, and it also means like defeats at Fort Duquesne and like Braddock's military defeat in the Ohio Valley can be included because they're in the start of the War of Succession, but they're still failing. And also like the Albany Congress, I think, and the fact that it didn't convince the Iroquois to switch sides from the French to the British left them in problematic because the Native Americans were still on their side. And I think basically like the tac not employing, having generals like Loudon who was not very aggressive compared to the later aggressive generals that Pitt chose to run the operations. And the failures to take Quebec and the failures to put like blockades in on the French ports, I think all of these are really, really important for why they failed early on. And their
Good,
tactics, they were still wearing their bright red uniforms. And as you said, relations with the colonial between the colonials and the British soldiers were not great because they had the ranking system whereby obviously if you were in a colonial officer, even if you outranked a British officer, you had to defer to the British officer because the British soldiers were given higher ranking. So, and the fact that there was not many professional soldiers by the British over there because they were all at home, and then the problem of like the colonial militia not really wanting to leave their own colonies to go and fight. So all of
yeah.
these things caused problems, I think, for the
It's
British.
funny. It's funny that this problem between. Sorry, this is a side note.
Yeah,
This is a slight digression, but the problem between the military and the colonists, that's actually a big problem for Britain and its empire, I think all the way until it loses it.
yeah,
I mean, the Australians, I speak for my country.
yeah.
Our national myth, the Anzac disaster, the Anzac
Mm.
debacle, is actually is bad coordination between military and colonists. Um,
Isn't that under Churchill? Like not to spoil, but
well,
we're going on to talk about
he
Churchill.
was first Sea Lord. Yeah, yeah, we can talk about that. We
Gallipoli.
can talk about that.
Yeah, well, we will be. We got
Anyway,
today. We start with Britain.
yeah, that's a digression. But can I just to resume? So
Yeah.
that was the War of Austrian Succession.
Yeah,
Generally
and the
bad
start of the
news.
7 Years' War, I would break it because the most of the
Right.
essays on this one are usually like, why did they fail to make progress before 1756? And then why were they successful for 1763? So I think the most logical bit is to just divvy those two essays up in half in this
Into
one.
two. Yeah, 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 exactly. And so if we turn to the second half, we look
Yeah.
at the 7 Years' War. The British do much better. They're much more successful. I think you could say it was incredibly successful for the British.
Hmm.
Partly because they had better leadership. They have William Pitt. Pitt
Yeah.
has much clearer goals, I think, in
Hmm.
mind, and better organization. The key factor is the Battle of Quiberon Bay, where the British gain complete naval superiority, and that means that the French can't resupply their troops, or they can't reinforce without having to confront the British Navy.
I think by that point they were already dead though, because I think that by Quiberon Bay they'd already taken Louisburg and Quebec. So I think it was more Pitt's like a number of things. I'll just run in and see if I miss anything. But like
Yeah, sure.
Pitt obviously put the Militia Act in place in 1757, which meant that they had a militia on the British Isles, which meant they could then send professional soldiers across. They sent 25,000 professional soldiers across, got 20,000 colonists to join because he paid them directly from the crown, which meant they could leave their territories and also equalize up the ranking system. So therefore they didn't feel like they were inferior. So that gave them a massive advantage. He designed the three-pronged attack to take out Quebec, Louisburg, and up Ticonderoga to keep the French army enforced. He appointed Amherst, Wolfe, and Howe as aggressive generals, ironically, because Howe ended up failing in the next war, but in this one, and they took both of them, which meant that the French could no longer get supplies, which meant they couldn't pay their allies, the Native Americans, which meant they lost them. He also paid Frederick the Great, in the Great Prussian leader, to keep the French occupied in Europe, which meant that the French were unable to restock. I think Quiberon Bay then exacerbated that by knocking out the French army, but I think they were pretty much done by then anyway. And then, of course, ultimately, they took the whole of North America off the French at the in the Treaty of Paris. So I think ultimately, if you're looking at just a war with the French, I think it was a very successful war. Their war.
Yeah, it was very successful. Yeah.
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 I don't
Okay.
think you can argue anything different. I mean, what the consequences of the colonists were different, but if you're arguing about the war, was it successful war with France? I would say yes, very successful.
Yeah.
You would
There's
totally
no
argue.
way you could say it wasn't, I don't think.
Yeah. I think the French were eliminated. I think that constitutes not good.
Not good. Yeah.
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 Cool. All right, let's end the video
Okay.
there because we've got that one. So we just do it. So we've got like each one like as we go. So we can do the next
Okay.
half in a little bit.